The European Union just turned its back on democracy. A majority of EU elected politicians, the people voted into office by European citizens, just voted no. 314 of them stood up and said that messaging platforms should not be allowed to scan the contents of people's private messages. In contrast, only 276 disagreed. The side against surveillance won the vote, but then it passed anyway because of some very creative voting rules hardwired into the EU system. Winning the vote was enough to stop it. Chat control now moves forward until 2028. So what the hell just happened? Well, apparently this is an institution where a majority can vote no and still lose. And that says a lot about who the EU actually answers to. But believe it or not, this is only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to how far the EU has strayed. So today we'll look at the powers EU elites just gave themselves against the will of the people, how they forced through this draconian measure after it was already rejected, and how chat control is just one piece of a much bigger plan. My name is DC and this is the Coin Bureau. Now let's start this unbelievable story by looking at what chat control actually does. The name sounds abstract, which is probably the entire point, but make no mistake, it's pointed directly at every single EU citizen. Essentially, chat control lets platforms scan the contents of private messages looking for illegal material. So not messages flagged by a court or messages from suspect, everyone's messages. That should already be cause for concern for anyone that cares about privacy and security. But even the most basic principles of a free society aren't safe under chat control. Normally, you're left alone unless there's a reason to suspect you of anything. You're presumed innocent and someone has to earn the right to look. That's reasonable. But chat control turns this idea on its head. It treats every ordinary European as someone to be checked first, just in case. So the default assumption is now suspicion. I don't want to go full doomer here because there was at least a decent carve-out for those that still care about privacy. After a significant fight, the European Parliament adopted an amendment aiming to exclude end-to-end encrypted apps like Signal from scope. Although that carve-out still needs council approval expected by around October 2026 before it becomes final. Now that's a solid win, and we'll come back to why it happened a bit later because there's plenty to look at there. But everything else is still fair game. Standard email, the cloud inbox where your whole life is archived, direct messages on platforms without encryption, the stuff you would assume only the other person sees. I mean, think about all the photos, the conversations, the half-formed thoughts in your mind that you'd never say out loud in public. For people in Europe under chat control, all of it is now under a standing permission to be looked at. And that permission runs until April 2028. So that's what we're dealing with here. But how could something so unpopular with everyday people end up becoming an official rule in a democracy? Well, that's exactly the problem. It was a vote they simply kept rerunning until they eventually got the answer they wanted. Very democratic indeed. Back on the 26th of March 2026, Parliament had already rejected extending the scanning framework. The tally then was 311 against, 228 for. So the idea was voted down. Dead, happy days. The old temporary rule expired on the 3rd of April exactly as Parliament intended. And that should have been the end of it, but it most certainly wasn't the end of it. A few weeks later, it came back from the grave. The Council formally revived its position on the 2nd of July 2026, and then an urgency procedure was invoked to bypass committee review and force an immediate vote. And that urgency motion scraped through by a narrow margin. Then the final vote landed on the 9th of July, the last sitting day before the summer recess, the one day when attendance is thin and scrutiny is low, while half of the people in the building are already daydreaming about the airport. So in other words, the proposal was rejected again and again and again, then dug up and reanimated until the desired outcome was forced through. And the timing here was no accident either, certainly not. It was the entire strategy. Now to get a clear picture of that, we have to take a closer look at the numbers that turned a defeat into a victory. This is crucial to understand, so stick with me here. On this type of vote, a second reading rule stopping the measure didn't just require more people in the room voting. No sir, it required an absolute majority of every single seat in Parliament. And in total, there are 720 seats, which means blocking it needed 361 votes, and the opposition got 340. So in theory, they actually won the room by 38 votes, but still fell 47 short of the bar. And this is the element where things get sinister because absence counts as a yes. Every MEP who didn't show up, every empty chair on that last day before recess functionally sided with the surveillance state. Silence is recognized as consent, which is absolutely crazy to think about. So schedule the vote when the chamber is emptiest, and it becomes much easier to squeeze through a highly unpopular rule like this one. The vote was merely theater for an engineered outcome. When people vote no, but the rule still wins, the rule was built to protect the outcome. So much for European democracy. Now, tracking these procedural games as they happen is tough, especially when there's so much at stake here. These types of big decisions shape our freedom. So if you want more breakdowns like this one, then be sure to check out the Finance Bureau. That's our channel for global finance, politics, macro, and stories just like this one. So be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown of the issues that impact your life just as much as your portfolio. Okay, back to Europe, and now we get to some of the damning details of this absolute mess. Why do I say that? Well, because if you're wondering how something like chat control can even be legal, well, then you're not the only one. In fact, EU politicians were warned that it may be illegal, and they were warned in writing by their own lawyers. On the 10th of June 2026, the Council Legal Service, that's the body that checks EU Council legislation for legal problems, looked at this proposal and concluded it was likely legal. So we're not talking about some activist group or some other outside campaigner. Their own in-house advisors were saying this looks dodgy. And the stated reason gets right at the heart of this entire issue. You can't treat an entire population as suspects. The Council Legal Service warned that the rule amounted to sweeping suspicionless scanning of private messages. They said it was likely incompatible with Article 7 of the EU's Charter of Fundamental Rights, the right to respect for your private life and your communications. And crucially, they said the voluntary label changes nothing because the core problem, potential access to everyone's messages, stays exactly the same regardless of whatever you want to call it. Some legal experts went even further, warning it would probably be struck down by the EU's top court if anyone challenged it. So EU politicians were told on the record by the people whose job it is to keep them inside the law that this crosses a line. And yet they pushed it through anyway. An institution that ignores its own lawyers only cares about pushing its own agenda forward. And now to the crazy double standard. While this institution demands total visibility into our messages, it's fighting hard to keep its own hidden. And I mean that literally. During the single biggest medical purchase in the EU's history, a contract for up to 1.8 billion doses worth 35 billion euros, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen was exchanging text messages directly with the CEO of Pfizer through personal text messages, not through official channels. And when journalists asked to see them using the EU's Freedom of Information law, the answer was simply no. The messages, they said, were short-lived, logistical, and not important enough to keep. And then, of course, conveniently, they couldn't be found at all. They replaced the phone and wiped the old devices without transferring any data, as you do. The EU's watchdog, the European Ombudsman, called this maladministration. And in May 2025, the EU's own General Court ruled against the Commission, finding it had failed to give any plausible explanation for why messages about a 35 billion euro deal had simply vanished. The Commission chose not to appeal and the ruling stands. So to put simply, they can read your messages, but you can't read theirs. Your privacy is negotiable or non-existent, but their secrecy is protected. And if you think that is a one-off, a single embarrassing episode, of course not. This is a pattern and it's still running today. In June 2026, the Ombudsman ruled against the Commission again over a different vanished message, this time from President Macron about trade talks deleted automatically by a disappearing messages feature. The Ombudsman called the Commission's handling of the deleted Macron messages a serious problem and said current practices create a blanket barrier to public oversight, recommending that such messages be mandatorily stored going forward. And also in June 2026, a fresh inquiry opened into yet another private group chat reportedly used by von der Leyen and several heads of state to coordinate strategy. The Commission has refused to release those contents. So that's 3 separate cases of the same institution running its biggest decisions through channels designed to vanish without a trace. The exact opposite of the communications that are archived and searchable forever, which it now demands from you, scanning for the citizens and auto-delete for the politicians. But if we step back for a moment and think about the structure of the EU, it all becomes clearer when you look at who these people are and how they got into their positions in the first place. Consider Christine Lagarde. As president of the European Central Bank, she sets monetary policy for the entire Eurozone. That's over 340 million people across 21 countries. The value of every single euro in people's pockets runs through decisions she makes. But she was never once on a ballot. Not once. She was nominated by heads of state and appointed by a qualified majority vote behind closed doors for a single 8-year term. No voter anywhere in the Eurozone put her there. And that means no voter can remove her. People can vote her out simply because nobody actually voted her in. So many of the officials scanning the public's messages were never actually chosen by the public. And the people who lost the vote and won anyway can't be unchosen by the public. That's the intentional design of the system. Now, if you're in the EU and skeptical about how critical I'm being here, you might think, hey, I've got nothing to hide. I'm no criminal. Why should I care if some algorithm skims my inbox? If this is you, please let me propose a different point of view. You're willingly handing over your freedom. But you don't have to believe me. Brussels has given us the answer to that. Ursula von der Leyen just confirmed that the Commission intends to propose EU-wide age restrictions on social media. And the technology to enforce that already exists. The EU has built an age verification app that can use a passport, national identity card, or a digital ID to prove someone meets the required age. Now, this doesn't yet mean every European must show ID to open Instagram. Brussels says the system can verify age anonymously. So there is no mistaking what's taking shape here. Chat control creates the power to scan private communications at scale. Age verification creates the framework for online accounts to be gated by a government-run system rooted in a person's real-world identity. And if we combine that, the pieces of a full surveillance system are being assembled. An identity-backed requirement to gain access, control over who gets access, and message scanning once you got access. Freedom is eroded piece by piece, and every piece is presented to the public with the same justification: safety and protecting children. We're seeing the same thing in places like the UK and Australia. Ordinary people are made more visible to the system while the people running it remain hidden from scrutiny. People's messages can be scanned and their identities can be checked, but when the public asks to see the messages behind a 35 billion euro deal, those messages somehow vanish. Great system. Thank God I support this with my taxes. Okay. Although the overall situation really doesn't look great, there are at least some positive signs on the horizon. The system did essentially steamroll the rejection vote on chat control, but it still had to stop and concede some significant ground. That encryption carve-out, the one that pulled the likes of Signal from the scanner, means there's still some good being fought for on the major political stage. And most importantly, people are finally coming together. There are some privacy groups and lawmakers fighting a good fight, and public backlash also helped force that concession because it was so deafening. A corrupt system relies on everyday people being too distracted to care. But if people stay engaged and voice their concerns with some energy at least, there's still hope to get things on the right track. Please get highly opinionated and let us know what you think in the comments. Is this the beginning of an EU surveillance state, or are some of us worried about nothing? And remember, if you enjoy digging deep on topics like this, then you should definitely check out the Finance Bureau. Like this video on how China is set to shake up the entire global economy. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon. This is DC, signing